Welcome back to the How We Roll Gaming podcast. How are you guys doing this afternoon? It looks beautiful out, but it's cold.
It's really cold, but hey, I'm enjoying my day off for President's Day. I'll take it.
I
Right.
am too. I will gladly take it these days.
Good way for us to stay inside and stay warm.
Yep, it's been an exciting couple of weeks behind the scenes for our crew. A little over a week before our recording date, tickets for GamerNation Con 10 went on sale, and the convention
Yes.
scheduled for the first weekend in April. I look forward to this every year.
And
And
so of the rest of us, since you've put us into that area as well.
yep, well,
We got my time off for that week.
that has put our planning for the con into high gear as we're finalizing the games that we're going to run for the con. And then just yesterday, Nick and I had a great alpha session for one of the games. We got feedback from a bunch of our players, just kind of doing a walkthrough, not an actual play, and getting feedback so that we can tweak it. And then in a couple of weeks, we have an actual playtest session scheduled. We've got playtests coming up for our annual three-part tag team series of games coming up in March. And then later today, as we're recording this, event submission is going to be open for the con, and we will be submitting our games. Confirmed with Chris, the con organizer, that we are proud to be a Gamer Cred achievement again this year. So if you play in a game run by anyone from How We Roll Gaming, you get that achievement. And so it's kind of
Yeah,
exciting.
an achievement and a nice little badge for yourself.
And Gamer Cred points that count towards things like, early registration for future cons. Woo!
Except they went up this year, you said so.
Yeah, Chris said that they're looking at going up to 250 points, but think about it. Every single one of us who was there last year got 100 Gamer Cred for the one ring at the end. So,
and then whatever we got individually.
Yeah, so if you're not at the 250, you're darn close.
I'm probably close.
Um,
But hey, one more con and then we're good.
yep, and we keep talking about GamerNation Con, so let's talk about what it is a little bit. It's a great small gaming convention that is hosted here locally in Plano, Texas, just north of Dallas proper. We already touched on this, saying that Stephanie and I introduced the two of you and the rest of the group to it. So it goes without saying that I heartily recommend it. One of the great things that I love about this con is it's all people who love games. And when I say it's small, it's about 150 people. And once you go, you're like family. But everyone there, they may not necessarily remember your name off the top of their head, but they're like, oh, I remember you. We had fun in this game last year. And
I remember you pulled out that thing in the game that made
yeah,
everyone laugh.
yeah, it's a great sense of community. This year, since it's the 10th, it's GamerNation Con 10 with Roman numeral 10X. So the theme is X Files or paranormal. And they always have a guest of honor every year. This year, it's a returning guest of honor, Sam Gregor Stewart, who was formerly the RPG director of Fantasy Flight Games and is now the RPG director of Edge Studio, who is just the other Asmodee imprint that took all of the role playing games. So all of the old FFG RPGs are now Edge Studio RPGs. So he's the man behind a lot of the games that our group really loves. Star Wars, Genesis, shout out to Robert here, Legend of the Five Rings.
Yep, gonna be looking to do one of those soon.
And Arkham Horror. I saw him running
Possibly.
L5. I saw him running several sessions of Five Rings at the first GamerNation Con we went to, GamerNation Con 6. So it is not out of the question for Sam to run Five Rings.
And for the Arkham Horror, you definitely said that the starter pack you got was like one of the best you've ever gotten before, correct?
I did it. It was packed full. Well, I happen to have it right here behind me, and this isn't going to work for the audio only version of the podcast. But I'm going to hold up to the camera and show that it is packed full to the rim
Goodies.
of goodies for the starter game. So
Goodies, descriptions, characters. I think there's even a few puzzles in there.
I think so. Not only is Sam going to be there, but some of our friends who are also regulars at GamerNation Con were contributors in a freelance capacity or an editorial capacity on Arkham Horror. So, given the theme of the con, I will not be surprised if there is some Arkham Horror on the schedule.
And I wouldn't mind playing some of it.
I would not either. Tickets are still on sale. You don't have to be local to go if you're listening to this and you're far away but are interested. You can check them out at the website tabletop.events/gamer-nation-con-x, and there's going to be a link in the show notes.
Yeah.
But
and then Chris also helps arrange, if you are coming from out of state, he arranges a hotel where you can link and get a reservation.
Yeah, the link to the hotel block is still not up. The hotel hasn't sent Chris the link yet. He just said this morning, as we're recording this, that he's just waiting to get that back from them and has reached out to them again and will post it as soon as he has it. So yeah, there is a hotel block that's in the neighborhood of $100 a night. The hotel is about a mile from the venue. The venue is awesome for convention like this, for a grouping like this. It's called Dallas Games Marathon. It's literally 10 minutes from my house. And it's set up. There's a huge room full of tables for gaming. Then there are some smaller rooms off to the side.
And there are shelves filled with every single board or card game known to man.
Yes.
That is very much not a hyperbole.
No, that is very much true.
They do actually have an inventory list of all of the games in their library that's available on their Discord.
And I know Nick's doing this, but you don't have to sign up for the scheduled games because a lot of people come in with their stuff and do pickup games.
You can do a pickup game. You can do a pickup game of something that's in the board game library. You can bring in your own and do a pickup game. You can do a pickup game of an RPG. Whatever you want to do. So we are. This is our second year as a group hosting quite a few games at GamerNation Con. Stephanie has a few as well. She is returning the popular Leonard Maltin game that she played last year that was inspired by the game of the same name on the Movie Defenders podcast. And spoiler alert, she reached out to the Movie Defenders to just get feedback on her game description for this year. And they liked it so much that they responded back that they are going to sponsor her Leonard Maltin game session and are sending one of the famous Movie Defenders blankets to give away to the winner.
Oh, wow. That's really good.
It's a big deal.
Yeah.
And then, of course, for those of you who like to hurt yourself and others, I'm sure someone will bring an Uno No Mercy deck and you can play into the night, because I know last convention that lasted until closing, which was like 2 a.m.
Yes, we played Uno No Mercy on Saturday night. Saturday night goes to 2 a.m. I don't remember what time we started, but we had a 12 to 15 person Uno No Mercy game that kept going until Chris came by and said, "We're turning off the lights. Get out."
That's when you know it's a good game.
Yes. GamerNation Con, lots of fun. We're looking forward to it. We will be doing a GamerNation Con 10 in review episode, our episode after the con. And I need to confirm, but we did have an offer for a special guest host for that episode too.
We will be very welcoming if he or she chooses to come.
That is correct. I don't want to jinx it by saying that it's a done deal until I am able to confirm. But they offered, and I told them, be careful what you offer where I can screenshot you saying it. Today, our podcast What we're going to be talking about is RPG glory stories. Now, there's plenty of venues out there that tell tales of RPG horror stories. They can be really fun and entertaining to read or hear about. I watch Crispy's Tavern's
Den
RPG
of the
horror
Drake.
stories every episode. But we want to switch things up a bit. And we want to feature those moments at the table that you remember because of how awesome they were. And so for our first RPG Glory Stories episode, we're looking at times that players made us very proud GMs. Players did something that really stood out to us. They showed tremendous skill or ability, or they just went for it and made us proud.
Yeah, those times where they just did it, and not only did the players get excited, but we, the GMs, got excited. We were like, yes, yes, let's make it happen.
This is why we do this.
And sing a little bit of Nick's Broken Face every once in a while never hurts.
Yes.
True.
Wait, you weren't there last week, Robert.
Maybe not in person, but I was there over the audio.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's right.
And you sent a picture. I saw it.
Yeah, it was Xander who wasn't there at
Yeah.
all. That's right. Yeah, it's been a while since we broke you, Nick.
It has been.
Would that be a proud GM moment, or would that be a get the bleep out of my house moment?
Oh, it very much it can just go either way, but either way, I'm somewhat impressed.
It was one of those, why didn't I think they would do this moment?
If there are no objections, I'll dive in first with my RPG glory story.
Go ahead.
Take it away.
A little bit of background is required here. One of our players, and shout out to Brian, I was just talking to him online yesterday. One of our players, Brian, was younger than most of us. When Nick and I first encountered him, he was, let's see, I'm just backtracking ages. He probably would have been around 12, give or take. And he was a good player then, but he was also, I hesitate to say immature because that's not what I'm trying to say. But he was 12, so
Yes.
he was thinking like a 12-year-old in terms of what he wanted to do. Yeah, it could have been frustrating to other people at the table, but he was 12. He came into another one of the games that I was running from home and was very much, his character was very, and this time I know the right word for the character because immature is not right, but his character was very impulsive.
Yeah, that's a good word.
Yeah.
And his character was intentionally impulsive. This wasn't player younger than the rest just doing something stupid just because they didn't know any better. He was playing the character. The character was impulsive because the character had a personal agenda. His character thought that she was the daughter of a famous pirate, and it was a Star Wars game. His character thought she was the daughter of a famous pirate, and she was trying to get her would-be mother's attention. So whenever they had the opportunity in one of their missions, she would do something big and bold and leave some kind of marker behind to try to get her mother's attention.
Basically,
And
notice me, mommy.
yeah,
Very much.
very much. And it was in character. Did it throw curveballs to the rest of the group that they didn't want or need as their characters because it was drawing heat that they didn't want? Yes, absolutely. But it was how the character was built. So, flash forward a little bit. He's joined one of the games that Nick and I co-run and brings his own personal brand of chaos to it. And we love it for the most part, except he might need to be tutored on interrogation scenes. But we won't go there.
Yeah.
That's later.
He is developed over the years. Now he's college age. He has developed into one of my favorite players to watch because he doesn't get a chance to join us as much anymore because college, but he brings a very unique approach to all of his characters and his game sessions. And I love to see it. I love to see the interaction because he's almost always a great wild card up against
Yeah.
everyone else.
That's a great way of saying it.
And he's
Yeah,
always a joy to play with. I've only
yeah,
played in like 2 games with him, but he's a treat.
he is, and he's only in college a little up the highway, so I'm trying to get him to join us in person a little more. And I sent him the link to GamerNation Con, so maybe we'll see him there. I would, if I had the extra money, I would buy his ticket to watch him spread his chaos to other GM's tables.
Mm-hmm. That would be quite the sight.
And we
But
actually know he would actually go if we paid
yes,
for his ticket.
yes. A couple of years ago, after many years of trying to come up with a good hook for a Star Wars campaign, limited duration, based on Les Miserables. I've been trying to come up with it for years, and I finally had the hook. Something finally gave me the right hook, so I started this campaign. Now, the hook was the characters, the PCs, are on Coruscant right after the fall of the Empire in Return of the Jedi. And as the Empire is trying to clamp down, that provided the perfect Les Mis kind of setting. You have the people in the lower levels of Coruscant who are pushing back against the Empire. The Empire knows that it's lost the war, but they're trying to hold on to Coruscant. And also by this time, we have all 3 books in the Aftermath trilogy of books, a lot of which has information about what's going on Coruscant. So I'm able to pepper events here and there from the Aftermath trilogy that the characters intersected with briefly. There's the background of the campaign. So Brian's character is an old Clone Wars era separatist commando droid. He has no compunctions about taking life. And his mission parameters are fairly narrow, and he will, anyone who's doing wrong, he will not tolerate, we'll say.
Yes.
So we're on the first full session. It's session 1. We had a little prologue in session 0. Quick plug for next episode's session 0 manifesto
Yeah.
episode. But little prologue at the end of session 0. We're in session 1. We're about halfway through, and all of the characters are in the underworld of Coruscant. They're in the below levels.
Yep.
Yeah.
In a
Where,
nice bar owned by one of our other players, Stephanie.
right.
Mm-hmm.
And so, seeking a few pieces of information, the group splits into 2 smaller parties to head off into other parts of the underlevels of Coruscant. I don't even remember what you were all going after.
We were going after some information about this professor.
Yes, because we had just come from the celebration parade that then got shut down by the Empire, because of course we're celebrating on the capital, so even though the Emperor's dead, it's still the heart of the Empire, so of course they
Yeah.
shut that down.
Exactly.
Then we got there and we needed to find this professor, and I believe Betsy, I think,
Yeah, I was there.
yeah, you were there too, Nick. We went with Brian's character down the lower levels to chase a lead, basically.
Yeah, so you get off, you're looking around. I have all of you roll perception checks. You all fail.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
What I have going on in my head, as you got off the lift onto this level, there's a group of young street urchins who picked your pockets.
Yeah, common
hazard.
orphan, lower level
Yeah,
types.
yeah. And so Brian's character rolls perception. Brian succeeds, and Brian shoots at the kids
With a sniper rifle.
with a sniper rifle, and
With very
rolls
much
in.
intent to end the children.
Very much so.
And he rolls quite well. And he one shot murders these 3 or 4 children.
Yes, and it's like one of those. If this was a movie, it'd be one of those shock scenes where the droid just. And we're like,
Yeah.
whoa, what the heck?
And so, understandably so, the
Kid
rest of
killing,
the.
we didn't really go for it.
Yeah. And everything else plays out for the 2 groups. You get back to the bar, and a huge, huge argument breaks out.
In character.
In character,
Yes.
yes.
We want to specify that. In character.
In character. To be fair, it sounded like some of the players were getting a little heated too. It was hard to
I was
tell.
trying to figure out what to do with this.
Yeah, and so.
And I had to
Because-
my character in the game was a pacifist because he was a snake person called us Luisi, but he was a pacifist. Eventually turned into a kleptomaniac, so that was fun to play. But he was definitely like, "No,
I didn't
you
sign
went a
up
little
for
too
this.
far. You went a little too far, Mister Murder Droid. You don't kill kids even if they pick your pocket." And they didn't because you have no pockets.
And so all of the players are basically dogpiling on Brian's droid. Like, we're going to put a restraining bolt on you, which, as the GM, I'm sitting back and I'm like, okay, restraining bolt potentially removes player agency. I don't like this. The rest of the players seem to be ganging up, and they're going to force the restraining bolt on him if he doesn't accept it. Multiple elements like this are going on, and I'm sitting there thinking, great, this is session 1, and I already have PvP.
And Brian did say his droid had grenades and he would fight if they tried.
So I start to feel like, okay, I need to step in here as GM and defuse this situation a little bit. Before I can say anything, Brian was playing online. Before I could say anything, Brian's voice comes out of the laptop speaker and he's like, hey, time out, everybody. I just want to say, I understand as a player where all of the other characters are coming from. I understand why the other players and the other characters are reacting the way they are. And I am totally fine with role playing out the scenario and, as both player and character, accepting the repercussions. Like, I'm not doing this to be a murder hobo, and as cheap as it sounds sometimes, it's what my character would have done, but as a player, I understand the reactions and am totally cool with my character taking his lumps for what he just did.
Which was very mature.
Yeah,
incredibly mature.
He was incredibly mature. He was still high school age at this time. He would have been about 16ish, and I have seen grown adults be less mature.
Yes.
I've had a moment or two where I have had a minor little meltdown over just when the dice don't go my way.
Yeah, I remember because I think it was
Clone Wars.
It was during Clone Wars or Green Jedi. It was something. And I came in just to watch and just like play the NPCs. And you had a duel with Shay Vizsla, and basically not Shay Vizsla. No, it is Shay Vizsla.
Yeah.
And it was like you said, the dice were just rolling really good.
And it pissed me off. And after that, I was like, okay, no. Deep breath. Sorry, guys. That's just, I freaked out a little bit because the dice just aren't going my way. And the way they're not going my way in this scene just pissed me off. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I could see where he's coming from because
Same. So could I,
how
because I was
I was
going
rolling
1A.
and how he was rolling. I was basically using my turns to take away his turns because that's just how the dice were coming up. So it felt like he wasn't getting a turn because every time I rolled, I would take away his turn.
Yeah, and I own it. I've seen grown adults
Oh
in
yes,
RPG situations like this one
who
that
do not
Brian and the rest of you were
share
in.
that level of maturity.
Yeah,
They would have gone the other side of it's what my character would do.
it's what my character would do, and now I'm going to fight all of you, and anyone that I defeat, I'm going to kill.
And you're taking away my agency.
He was very mature also in that restraining bolt. We came up, we as a group agreed with rules for the restraining bolt.
Yeah, there'd be only one owner, which I think was Stephanie's character.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she had the controller for it, and he had the ability to try to resist the restraining bolt, and we set down what the rules were for that.
Mm-hmm. And of course, we had to get it on him first. So
Yeah, we agreed to all of that before we started playing out the repercussions. The restraining bolt ended up going on him, and the campaign proceeded as normal.
yeah,
I
and I want to
thought that
highlight there was never another instance like that first session again.
that's what I like about Brian's chaos. He has thought out, usually, and we all have our moments, he has thought out, okay, here's multiple ways that there could be fallout to these actions that I'm about to do. I liken it to, seeing the Terminator HUD when
Yeah.
he's trying to decide what to do, when the Terminator's trying to decide what to do and what the outcomes could be. And it's like, okay, you know what? This action isn't going to be worth the fallout, so I'm not going to do it. But this one over here, oh, this could be fun. So let's go for it. Brian, I hope you're listening. I'm going to send you a link to this episode, but you are currently my favorite RPG glory story for a proud GM moment, because to this day, I tell absolute strangers that I start talking to about RPGs, be it in person or online. I tell them about the most mature player moment that I have ever had at any of my tables. And it is you in that session one of Les Mis. So thank you very much, Brian. Hopefully you're listening after I send you the link.
Yeah, and it's a great story. It basically took what could have become a horror story and turned it
Yeah.
into a glory story, and those are the best type of stories.
Exactly. Exactly. It's a pretty short story. It doesn't have a lot of moving parts to it. And the whole thing encompassed maybe 10, 15 minutes of a session in a 12-part campaign. So out of all of those hours of that campaign, we're talking about 10, 15 minutes, but
Yeah.
it is probably the single most memorable moment of that campaign for me.
Yeah.
It's definitely up there.
Yes. Oh, that's
There's
not to say
also
that there aren't other memorable
Oh yeah,
moments.
there's ton of those.
there's plenty, and then and we made some inside jokes. We made discount Thrawn joke or general value Thrawn jokes, and then some other stuff. We'll get into Stuart later, but
Mhm.
Yeah, that's my RPG glory story for today. So I am now going to toss it over to you, Robert.
yes. And this glorious story was one where I was a player and Nick was the GM. Some of it involves me, but we're mostly going to shine the spotlight on another of our players named Xander. Fun fact, we actually have two Xanders in our group. One of them is Daryl's
Yes.
son, but the other is another man who is in what we called our Nick's Whispers of Gaze campaign. And basically how that came about, from what I heard, is Nick took a starting set
Yeah.
campaign from Age of Rebellion, Star Wars, called Whisper Base, where basically you're rebel insurgents and you take over a secret listening post on the planet of Onderon, and then usually that ends when you take the base. Now Nick was like, okay, you got the base now, so why don't we just make a campaign about it where you're using the base to do rebel stuff, basically. The
Yeah.
big
Just sort of.
overarching thing is you're trying to free the planet of Onderon from Imperial rule, but along the way you're doing some other stuff for the Alliance from the information you're getting from the listening post.
Yeah.
And Xander's character specifically was an alien who is able to gain access to the wider galaxy, but he isn't very well versed in advanced technology. So he doesn't use energy weapons. He doesn't use fancy ships. He's very much a native. He uses simple percussion
Relatively
weapons,
simple.
traps, spikes, all that stuff.
Good old
And we
fashioned
went
hunting and tracking.
pretty much. He was our hunter and tracker. But that man could shoot. He was our glass cannon. He could shoot and hit anything from here to extreme range, which is the longest range you can get in personal scale in Star Wars. And he could do it every time. There was never a check he did where I thought he could miss because he was just so loaded. But what we had to do is we went to this forest planet, and it was literally
Based
a
off
forest
of the
planet.
information you got from the information that you got from the base.
Yeah, because basically the Empire was basically making, if you ever seen Clone Wars, they were making their own version of the defoliator. So basically just flames and destroy all the living things. And they went to this on this forest planet, and it was an unusual forest planet because basically it's like a forest farm. All the trees were lined up in rows. There was roads going here from there to the base. It was very elaborate, very methodical. And we went in there to try and stop this virus or this weapon. Didn't have such a great landing. We actually crash landed on the planet, so that didn't start as well. But as we were making way to our base, we would notice that these Star Wars version of transports would go to and fro, and we were like, okay, we need to hijack one of these because it'll help us get into the base. So Xander did what I now dub as the Ewok method. He basically laid down a pit trap. Basically, if the thing went over it, a wooden stick would come out, pierce one of the tires, and it would just hit a tree, stopping, giving us time to take the vehicle.
Now,
so he does it. He lays it down.
The vehicle, the wheels are roughly double the size of the tallest player there.
Yeah, think like monster truck tires on steroids. So he rolls.
This thing has 6 of them.
Yes. It's that one vehicle. It's one of those vehicles. If you ever watched Revenge of the Sith, it's that one truck-looking vehicle on Kashyyyk that was rolling and shooting missiles while the Shepherders were shooting at it. That's what we hit. So Xander rolls, and I think he only got one triumph, but it was a great roll. Like he punctured it perfectly. It spun out, hit a tree, and everyone on the vehicle was knocked out. So we had to think, what is Xander going to use his triumph for? And I don't know if it was him or Nick who decided, okay, there's someone really important on this vehicle. So we go in, secure the vehicle, and we just find in one of the seats, passed out, is a human in a white military uniform apparel with gold tussles and an insignia marking him as a Grand Admiral. Which, if you know Star Wars, there's only 12 of those, and they are the most important military people in the Empire.
Yeah,
this is basically what Thrawn was. Wasn't Thrawn, but it was another one of them.
Yeah.
So we basically laughed because we knocked out and captured a Grand Admiral because Xander poked a tire with a sharp stick. But that was not the end of our session, because this entire session was basically a glory story because everything went right.
Yeah.
So we secured the Admiral. Those that could wear it put on like Imperial Stormtrooper uniforms, because some of us were human, some of us weren't.
Your classic sneak into the base.
Yep, so basically we're doing in there and we're driving, and I think I don't know what check it was. It was either warfare or piloting. I think I was the pilot of the vehicle. So we're driving in the base, going to the garage, and Nick's like, okay, roll a check to park it, basically. And I roll it, and I get a triumph. And we're thinking, okay, what are we going to use this triumph for? It's a basic parking job. I don't want to say I parked the best ever. So I was like, okay, we're in an Imperial base, going to a garage. This is a military base. There's a lot of vehicles. And I was just like, okay, we're in the garage. For a triumph, I want there to be a tank. And Nick was like, okay, but I choose the tank. And what tank did you choose, Nick?
I chose the modified sort of juggernaut tank, which basically just the head of it on treads with a missile launcher and a bunch of lasers.
And I was like, I will take it. Because I was an alien. So if I jump out and try to go sneak in this base, I'm going to be caught because, Imperials don't use aliens, except for like slave labor.
Mhm.
So while our more human character players went in trying to find the weapon and anybody associated with it, I and I think Xander as well, we were like, okay, well, they need a distraction. So I'm like, okay, I get in the tank with Xander and we're just going to have a party. So I turned on the tank, went outside, and basically started wreaking havoc. The whole base is on alert, and I'm being a great distraction with Xander,
Yep.
giving our other players enough time to find the weapon and the scientist, neutralize it, get the scientist along with the Grand Admiral. We destroy the base, secure the weapon, and we fly out on a stolen Imperial like Gazanti class cruiser that can carry stuff. And we destroyed the base, got the weapon, got a Grand Admiral captive, prisoner of war, and a new tank. And then Nick was like, okay, now I got to figure out where you're taking the Grand
This
Admiral
guy.
prisoner. You can keep the tank, but the rebels are definitely going to want that Grand Admiral prisoner somewhere more secure. And that led us into another campaign later on a specific orbital prison. But it was like, from what Xander did all the way up to the end, it was one of the most smooth sessions we've ever done. Literally nothing went wrong just because we had great ideas. Xander and everyone else had great roles. It was just one of those
It was one of those
made
moments that's like that make
made
it.
for
It
TV
makes
moments.
yeah.
And we were just like, yes. And it all started with Xander poking a tire with a sharp stick.
If they again the absurdity of it, like I rolled with it because like he convinced me like, well, there's plenty of larger than average sticks here on the planet. It's like I'll give it a shot.
And
And
he gave it a shot.
sometimes that's all you need to do is start off with just one piece of information can change the whole trajectory of a game.
It definitely did. And we were like, okay, we got this Grand Admiral. Everything changes now. We got to make sure we get out of here in one piece with that guy. And all that because Xander channeled his inner episode Return of the Jedi Ewok method to just destroy a vehicle with basically wood.
Mm-hmm.
And we're like, okay. And then we said from that day on, Xander, you make all of our traps.
I am not part of that campaign, but I've heard that story before, and it always sounds awesome.
It
Oh, it was
was
awesome.
it was awesome.
Of all the times in the game, that's the top moment, and then there are a few other top moments.
Yeah, but that's
Like the
a
prison
hard
break
one to top.
scene,
Yeah,
the Manon scene, but that's number one in my book.
I think that leads into my story pretty well.
Take it away.
Take it away, Nick. I was there for this one.
And I want to hear the full story of this one.
And spoiler
Yes,
alert, this one also involves Xander.
indeed. Let's start off with a little bit of background. This is what was called a Star Wars Special Missions team, where the group basically, well, what it says on the tin, they did special missions for the rebellion against the Empire. And there are many, many stories, and I will likely continue to go back to this particular campaign because it has some of the most iconic. Paradoxically, let's start with the end.
Yeah, this particular campaign had just everything about the characters all just clicked. It was one of those beautiful campaigns where even players that came in late, like Stephanie and I joined this campaign after it had been going on for a while, but had ideas for characters that just once they showed up,
They became integral, iconic characters.
you know how when you occasionally see a TV show, and in the first episode, or if a new character shows up later on, they're all fully formed and you know that they have a history, even if you don't spell it all out, and they function as a fully formed character rather than just, oh, here is so and so's new neighbor, and they're a blank slate until the writing team starts grafting stuff on. All of these characters were fully rounded characters from the go.
Here's the ones where they don't have to say, we've known each other for so long. It's just the way they're acting, you can tell.
Yeah, and it worked out so well. But yes, instead of starting at say a middle or beginning point, we are actually starting our first glory story for this campaign from the end. And what I submit to the team, the story of the campaign shattering kaboom. Now here's the behind the scenes. This is the penultimate session of the campaign. The team has been tracking down the current major antagonist, who goes by the code name of Black Hole, head of Imperial Intelligence. Has sent out various traps and deceptive plans to take down the Special Missions team. Always hidden behind a secret hologram that they cannot trace, and always with a menacing lecture.
Which we never listened to.
Yes, but basically they had found his secret base on the edge of wild space. It was their moment to finally track down and have their big one-on-one final fight against this mysterious spy master and his many minions. In order to sell the idea of how desolate this was, and to hint at the super weapon that he has, because it's an Imperial base, of course it's got a super weapon, I described the planet from orbit, a completely frozen, solid planet. But in front of them, coming out of hyperspace, is this large, perpendicular plane of ice that's only broken up by the sight of a large capital ship stuck within the ice. And so describing this vast, massive sheet of ice in orbit of the planet.
And what did they do, Nick?
Well, can I speak as one of the characters what we thought?
Mm-hmm.
One of the players? We see this. We've been dealing with Black Hole, who is this evil mastermind and manipulator. And we see this ice field in orbit. This is a trap. And we treated it as such. We investigated it from every angle in far more excruciating.
Which was confusing to me, because it was like they kept on checking sensors, they were checking visual perception, they were setting up little probe droids, and it was like,
It's basically one of those scenes in, I think I remember this, like XP to level 3. He did a skit like this where they're like, he just says one thing and then his entire players are going way too far in depth, and in his mind he's just like, no, that's the answer. This is not that complex.
Well, and you also have to factor in that my character in this campaign was a member of Rebel Alliance intelligence who was also a deep cover operative in the Empire, so was also a legitimate card carrying member of Imperial intelligence, and was paranoid and suspicious of everything by nature.
especially considering how every single mission since the introduction of Black Hole was like, it was him behind it the whole time, or yet another trap.
He doesn't do anything without a reason. So there's got to be a trap up here. Let's figure out how to get past this so that we don't spring the trap.
But then Xander, it did confuse me, but I was like, okay, that's fine. I've succeeded at making Black Hole into. They may not take him seriously for his grandiose scenery-cheering villainy, but they understand that he can get shit done. That he's the type that would make a booby trap elaborate like this. So I let them stew in it, and it's like, okay, they'll just maneuver a couple things here and then.
Actually, Nick, I think it's also important to mention, since we're starting at the end, we went into this end game of it by having a flash forward.
Yes.
And what was that flash forward?
It was sort of a rip on the. So you're wondering how we got here. Them on being on a planet that is now like rapidly cracking ice and ocean.
It's warming, and we're sitting amid ice and snow as if it was a beach.
Yeah. Now
What happened next, Nick?
we do get to that, but here's how that was not what was supposed to happen, but it still ended up happening.
And one of the characters was conspicuously missing from the scene as Nick
Yes.
had painted it.
In order to hint that I was plotting to at least have a casualty on the team. But here's what happened here's where the whole thing shatters apart. Now, Xander was playing a rebellion style sort of political and journalist propagandist. And it's sort of been because a lot of special missions were kind of messy and probably wouldn't make it into the New Republic history books. And as part of that, he sort of went through a start of darkness, where he's taken on more questionable morals than he had at the beginning. But he does say, like, can I make a scan of the planet itself? And I was like, sure. He makes the roll, successful. Nothing. There's no discernible life on this planet. And then he sits back and he starts thinking.
Which is always dangerous.
I'm sure Nick was like, oh no, what is he doing?
My assumption was he's going to try to open fire with their small sort of corvettes. The ship is just sort of try and find where Black Hole's base is. But they're like, but that's not going to work because it's a deep underwater complex with a heavy ceiling. But no, I see him pull out the books and looking at the scale of the ship, and he's asking me more questions as the rest of the team is scanning, and he's checking on what their checks are.
As the players, we haven't quite picked up on what he has in mind yet.
And he starts telling you to make additional checks. And I was like, okay.
But we can tell you as GMs, if players start doing checks and asking you specific questions, you better be ready for what they're about to do.
Yes.
Before he asked me one final question. So this plane of ice, is this attached to anything? Which I answered up more appropriately, the direct ship is attached to it. It's just free floating in space. To which he then, and I forget the exact phrasing, because I think my brain exploded.
Yeah, because with that answer, you sealed your fate.
But yes, Daryl, what does our esteemed friend Xander come up with his big brain in that moment?
He comes up with, well, we know where his base is because we know where the transmission is coming from because you just told us that we were able to fix on that location. That we know that the orbital bombardment won't work because we know where his base is. So this giant field of ice is large enough that yes, it will start to melt on entry into the atmosphere, but it's large enough that it and the ship within will retain most of its mass. So we're just going to push it into the gravity well so that it falls down onto the base and destroys the base.
And with that, the record scratched.
Yes.
It was at that moment I knew the campaign was over. Like in my head, I was still I was flipping through things. I was like doodling out something from behind, but inside I was sweating because I was like.
And meanwhile, our characters all use our talents and skills and such to help make this a reality.
Yeah, so I did say okay, one of my fundamental things, and we mentioned it in first time GMing, never always say yes, but it will be difficult.
Now, I don't recall, Nick, did I use the slightly broken counter espionage?
Yes, you used it was the signature ability.
Yes, signature ability. I was drawing a blank on that term. Did I use that to kind of help make this a reality too?
You did.
So for those unaware,
and then you removed you explained the ability.
For those unaware, the signature ability counter espionage in the Star Wars RPG effectively allows the character that has this special ability to defeat the plan of an enemy operative with just a single roll. And that enemy doesn't even have to be present. The balancing part of that is the player has to explain to the GM what actions they are taking to foil the enemy's plan. It does say enemy agent, and since it is a spy signature ability, the idea is you're defeating the plan of another spy agent. Well, that's kind of all Black Hole is.
Yeah, what's
So
more spy than the spy commander?
So even if you try to limit what you can do with this signature ability by saying no, it has to be against another intelligence asset or spy operative kind of person, that's all Black Hole is. That's what he's been established as. So you can't even
Weasel my way
rules
out of
has
it.
written it.
Yeah.
It applies to Black Hole. I don't even remember what I came up with, but I came up with something that I think we all workshopped it as a group, and the GM does have final approval or
Say
denial of
if it
it.
works, because again, you didn't know what Black Hole's plan was. So I remember it being like sort of nondescript, but a script enough that it's like it would hit anything from like calling reinforcements to a sort of secret escape pod.
And so we workshopped out what I was doing as my character, and we had it pretty ironclad. We had it pretty airtight, so there was no room for Nick to really say no. And I
Because
succeeded in the role.
I could also easily have like in coming up with this as the end game, I made certain that there was no means of like he's not gonna escape this plan. He's that confident in the base and the plan.
So he was hoist on his own petard.
Basically, like a spy, his ego was his own downfall.
And with a couple more checks, they with their ship's smaller mass, but because this thing is in the vacuum of space,
There's
doesn't
no
take that much to
wait.
push this giant slab of ice that then crashes into the planet, deep into the ocean, blowing up the base and its geothermal control over the planet.
Without having to go through the gauntlet of troops and defenses and everything that Black Hole had in his base to get to him. We defeated Black Hole and destroyed his Cobra weather machine.
By throwing a giant ice block at it.
And on that day, Nick learned the downfalls of making a very comprehensible set piece.
Yes. What I intended to be just a subtle foreshadowing and sort of cool set piece, like seeing the giant statues in the Lord of the Rings or stuff like that. It literally became the instrument of my downfall as well as my villain's downfall.
And Daryl, if you can remember, how did Nick look when you designed this plan?
Nick looked sad. I still feel sorry.
There was an element of sadness, but there's also an element of brilliance to it. You didn't take what I assumed you guys would see is just what most of players would see as just cool set dressing, usually for mood. You managed to figure out how to work that into the structure of the narrative. You took something that I introduced in the narrative, and then you used it in the narrative against me.
To this day, I am simultaneously still proud of Xander coming up with that, us helping make it work and accomplishing it, but also I feel bad because I know that you put a lot of prep into that finale session, and we just said, drop big ice cube on it, and we win.
Again, probably in the moment, yes, there was sadness, but there's also in that moment I didn't freak out. I didn't explode because I was like, damn, that's clever. Like I couldn't help but be like, And I understood you guys felt it too. It's like, wow, that on the one hand you could argue that's anticlimactic, but also it's the most pragmatic solution to the problem. And so it's like how sometimes you could be playing spy games, but also sometimes you just need to hit something with a big iceberg.
It kind of reminds me of that web series on YouTube for movies and TV shows, How It Should Have Ended. You basically pulled a How It Should Have Ended on that campaign.
Yeah.
Basically, it's like, again, an element that admittedly was pretty late into my planning. And probably that's possibly where it went wrong. But if anything, it was incredible that you guys are able to take something so not as well thought out on my end and think away a solution that hit everything that I had prepared already on the ground.
We had fun, and I think all of us felt a little bad for you, though, at the way we did the end run. And which also forced you to have to, when we came back to the flash forward to the end of everything, as we're sitting on the quote unquote beach, you had to bring the character that was missing back in because, as I recall, you had plans not necessarily for a character death, but for a character disappearance to
Yeah,
lead into a short kind of
sequel campaign.
epilogue mini campaign
Yeah,
And
that
instead, it
we,
was just, "Hi guys, I'm here."
yeah.
yeah, the character came walking in with drinks, and that's why they weren't there. They were off getting more drinks for us
So what
all.
was going to initially like a recap slash somewhat somber goodbye became a beach party end.
The
Yeah.
silver lining is none of that's gonna have to be redacted.
Hmm. I mean, that it was still amazing, and also the fact that I was able to still work in my weird. It ends on a beach with a falling out ice planet. It was
I,
like
I, I still have fond memories of that campaign and that finale.
that again. That finale is like I rank it personally high because it's like considering the amount of effort I put into it, it was like such a clever way to end the story in a way that I wouldn't have seen coming. And it really did show how much because it did take all of your skills, all of your thinking and plotting to get that ice ball moving.
But we did it.
And made a beautiful story.
It makes a beautiful story, and that's maybe the capstone of it. But it's like it's on a long series of stories that like if you when we get through all of them, you can look back and see how like all of those stories have elements where it's like okay, that's how we got to there, where they've could come up with something so off the wall.
I loved those characters. I would love to revisit those characters sometime.
Yeah.
Stephanie loves her character
Oh yeah, and we love
from
that.
that.
That's probably would be my next glory story if I from this campaign.
Yeah, she wants to be on the episode where we talk about that particular glory story.
But yes, I think
And
that's
that
a good. These are this the start of these glory stories. They get bigger, better, sometimes smaller scale, sometimes just as big as as a campaign ender.
and more of those pin drop moments are definitely on the way because our
Yeah.
group is very good at making glory stories like that.
You never know when they're going to happen. Sometimes they're the result of days or months long sessions planning, and sometimes it's just really good luck.
And it's hearing these stories that have made me both happy but anxious if I ever get Daryl, Nick, Betsy, and Stephanie, and Xander if he ever comes back
Hmm.
in one of my campaigns at once. Because then I'm like, I am both going to be have fun, but I'm also going to be screwed with anything I think up.
Well, and we would also love to share glory stories from any of the listeners out there.
This is
So,
true.
so feel free to send us an email, send us your glory story at podcast@howwerollgaming.com, and it could be included in one of our future RPG Glory Stories episodes.
Indeed. Because that's sort of what we're here to do. We're here to spread the good word of gaming for everybody.
And who
Yep,
knows, your stories may give one of us an idea in a current campaign.
You
yep.
never
Because
know.
as all good GMs, I am not above borrowing from other sources, from other GMs or movies or TV or there was a recent episode of another great gaming podcast, Me and Steve Talk RPGs, where one of the Steves had special guest Brev from the Movie Defenders podcast that we mentioned earlier, talking about, I believe the episode title was In Defense of Movie Thievery.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a good listen. And everything that they were saying, I was like, yep, I do that. Yep, I do that. Yep.
As we say in the gaming scenario, there's no such thing as an original idea. It's just a
No.
reskinned old idea.
But I think that hits the end of our glory stories and the end of this. This is our quickest episode so far.
Things go fast when you're having fun.
Exactly.
And we've only just started.
Time to hit with our standard closing info. So check out our website at howwerollgaming.com, and on the website you'll find links to all of our socials, information about our current campaigns, and a link to our merch store to help us keep producing the podcast. And if you have any questions you'd like us to answer, topics you'd like us to cover, or even submit your own RPG glory story, like I said earlier, shoot us an email at podcast@howwerollgaming.com. So what do we have coming up in our next episode, guys?
That would be our lovely Session Zero Manifesto.
Yes, the
Where
Session
you
Zero Manifesto.
But you learn one of the most important aspects of starting a new game with people. Starting with something a little bit quick that isn't quite the first session.
But
Yep.
immensely important to the other sessions in the
Yep.
future.
Super important. I think we kind of started to make that point clear last episode, and it will become crystal clear next episode
Yes.
as we issue our manifesto.
Because I will say, in all the stories we just told, every single one of them had a Session Zero.
Yep, sure
Mhm.
did. All right. Well, until then, we will see all of you next time. So, as always, I'm Daryl,
I'm Nick.
And I am Robert.
and this is How We Roll.